Welcome, everyone. We're just letting everyone come in, so give us a sec as participants are logging on. Well, let's get started. Welcome to Revising the Conversation, introducing the Reimagining Equity and Values in Informal STEM Education, or REVISE Center, which is a cooperative agreement between the Center and the National Science Foundation. Before we get started, this webinar is being recorded, and we want to let you know that you can submit any questions via the Q&A function throughout the webinar. We also have two ASL interpreters, Kathleen and Jonathan, from the Communities of Color Operating in Allyship, or COCO, joining us today. You should be able to see them in the gallery of presenters. We will have them spotlighted. They will also have an ASL designation and can be pinned. You can also drag the bar on the right to make the panelist gallery bigger. We are also providing live captioning via Zoom. To turn this option on, look for the CC icon in the webinar controls. If any issues arise, please let us know through the Q&A function. With that, my name is Lisette Torres-Gerald, and I use she, her, ella pronouns. I am the Director of Operations and Communication for the REVISE Center, as well as a senior researcher at Turk. I am a brown Latina, and I am wearing a purple floral shirt, brown curly hair, and dark-rimmed glasses. I am in front of a green and yellow REVISE Center background. I come to you from the unceded, occupied lands of the Otoe, Missouri, Pawnee, Ponca, and Omaha nations. Now the rest of the REVISE team will introduce themselves, starting with Stephen.
Good morning and good afternoon to folks. My name is Stephen Alkins. My pronouns are he, him, elle, and I am the Director of Vision and Accountability for the REVISE Center, as well as the Director for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, Belonging for Turk. I am a Black male with a low haircut, and I am wearing a plaid purple and blue shirt sitting in front of a yellow and green REVISE background. And I am also coming to you from land that is home to the Pawtucket or Pennacook, Massachusetts, Wampanoag, Nipmuc, and Pocumtuck peoples. Right. So I will pass it to Diane Miller.
Good morning and good afternoon. I'm Diane Miller. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm an African-American woman. I'm wearing glasses. I'm the Vice President of Educational Programs at the Detroit Zoo. I'm sitting in front of a green and yellow screen. And I will pass it to Patty.
Hi, everyone. I'm Patti Ruiz. I am the Director of Virtual Infrastructure and Community for the REVISE Center. I work at Digital Promise as a Senior Research Scientist. I am a white Latina with brown hair and wearing glasses, coming to you from the unceded lands of the Kumeyaay. And I will pass it back off to Lisette.
Thank you, Patty, and the rest of the team. We would like to acknowledge upfront our Revised Center staff. Kelly Paulson from Turk, Sana Karim from Digital Promise, as well as our Revised partners, Selene Gonzalez Carrillo from Organic Oneness, Kirill Askew and her team, Tara Corchain and her team at CAST, Glashonda Lawyer and her ASL interpreters, Kathleen and Jonathan from COCO, Sandy Ling from the Detroit Zoo, and of course, our NSF ASL program officers, Lynn Tran and Manya Ruffin-Nash, who are ASL program co-leads, and Cognizant Program Officer Ellen McCallie. And now we welcome some opening remarks from our ASL Program Officer, Dr. Manya Ruffin-Nash.
Thank you, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here from the National Science Foundation, and we give you warm greetings for this first large webinar coming to you from our new Revised Center. Just wanted to note that on behalf of the ASL team, we are ecstatic to have this opportunity to support the Resource Center that has a focus on equity, which, as you know, is extremely important to us. And with our new Resource Center, we've really elevated our focus both on equity within the Resource Center, but also within our program and our new solicitation. We believe that the resource team here in Revise will be able to really help to support and even push the work that we've been doing in the informal context that has an equity focus. And so we are really glad to be working with the Revise team and with you as we really push on ensuring that our informal communities and beyond are really thinking and working towards equitable solutions and practices in STEM. So again, just want to say thank you. We hope you really enjoy today's webinar and learn a lot. So thank you very much. I'll turn it back over to our Revise team.
Thank you, Dr. Ruffin-Nash. We want to reiterate our gratitude to you, Lynn, Ellen, and the other ASL program officers who have been extremely supportive in realizing the goals of the center. The Revise team will be expanding to include 2 new members yet to be determined: a center manager and a content and communications coordinator. The full-time center manager will manage the daily center operations, coordinate events, and help curate and synthesize resources. Meanwhile, the content and communications coordinator will be 60% time and will generate content for and by the informal STEM education community. For more information about these positions, please go to www.terc.edu/work-with-us/careers. The Revise Center is guided by internal advisors from TURC with extensive knowledge of the AZLE program, informal STEM education, and equity-focused research design and methodologies. We have additional support from a large external advisory group from a diverse array of ISE sectors that span from ISE research and practice to science communication, equitable outreach strategy to STEM career pathway development, as well as from authentic relationship building to policy making. You will have the opportunity to learn more about our advisors on our informalscience.org website. At this point, some of you may be wondering why we named the center Revise. Well, our team understands that institutional transformation related to equity cannot happen in just 5 years. We wanted to be transparent about what the center could do for the ISE field. As a former scientist and writing center director, I proposed the acronym REVISE, R-E-V-I-S-E. Revise literally means to see again. Keith Lehman, professor of English and creative writing at Rice University, writes, "Revision is a dynamic practice of revisitation, premised on ethically reimagining the ingredients, scope, and primary audience of one's initial vision. In the context of equity, this means asking hard questions about who ISE is for. Who typically benefits? Who is often excluded? It emphasizes practice, adaptation, flexibility, and an ethic of care. It's reimagining who can do science and what is science for. It challenges what is informal science and what does that language imply. Thus, the reimagining equity and values in informal STEM education, or Revise Center, is a collaborative effort to advance equity across the informal STEM education field through the following 4 functions. By promoting equitable practices that support the AZLE program and disrupt patterns of inequity across the ISE field. By cultivating a multi-sector, diverse community dedicated to promoting equity in ISE experiences and environments. By raising the visibility and impact of equity-focused research and practice in the ISE field and its contributions to the overall STEM endeavor. And lastly, to support AZLE PI's prospective PIs, and partners in enacting their commitments to equity with respect to research and practice.
Thank you, Lisette, and this is Stephen taking over. And I want to also note that we are speaking slowly for access reasons, more specifically so that our ASL interpreters who are working in 2 languages have time to translate. So it is important to note that we do start this endeavor by thinking about an equity framework that can be evolved and co-developed. So we begin with this idea that we are working in community and solidarity alongside you and NSF to improve research and practice, to reimagine and enact an equitable construction of one STEM identity that is aligned with intersectional aspects that they bring to the table that informs one's epistemology, cultural values, goals, and needs. Thus, we redefine and foster STEM competencies that are adaptive, inclusive, and responsive to different cultures and abilities. Thus, when the ISE community truly centers equity, it will adequately address the needs of diverse communities, unlock and pave new STEM career paths, and generate resources that will allow everyone to make informed decisions that lead to successful outcomes. We build upon this framework with your help and the help of our advisors to ensure that our activities and the initiatives are co-created and co-developed. It is vital that everyone in the ISE community feel a sense of ownership and responsibility in this work. Moreover, it is important to recognize and celebrate that there is a lot of great work that has been done and is currently being done to advance equity. For example, our predecessors, such as the Center for Advancing Informal STEM Education, or CASE, has laid instrumental groundwork for equity in ISE. Their work and your great work in the field has better enabled us to figure out our role and position in the field. Simply put, the Revise Center is a complement to and a component of the ISE ecosystem that cooperatively communicates to strengthen the bond among us, very similar to how the brain and cellular communication exists between groups of neurons and larger networks. Much like the neuron pictured here, the ISE ecosystem can be strengthened when activities and initiatives are correlated and information is communicated and shared fluidly across different entities in a variety of directions. NSF to Revise, Revise to external partners, and all of the combinations therein. This allows for a common interest convergence around equity while maintaining the very diverse nature of each of the entities. So for my hip hop people in the room, this is very much like a hip hop cipher. The impact of this is the creation of an adaptive ecosystem capable of being discretely and topically organized, which generates greater resources and a more cohesive ISE ecosystem of activities that facilitate sustained equity. With sustained equity in ISE, we can then disrupt patterns of inequity, continue to expand and include diverse populations, emphasize equity-oriented practices, and expand the ASL portfolio. Now let's look at these in a bit more detail. To be a disruptor, the Revise Center must provide consistent support to groups that are looking to institute systemic change at their institutions. This includes gathering research findings and data to inform strategic plans that can be leveraged to start and maintain transformative change. Furthermore, the center must actively listen to understand the ISE community to help evolve our contextual framework for equity. This informs our work. Finally, with the tools and resources we generate, it is imperative that we are sharing ways in which people can evaluate and track the progress of their own work and initiatives as a means to ensure lasting impact. In expanding and including diverse populations, you'll be hearing from Diane Miller in a bit of how we intend to reach different focal audiences. We aim to bring folks together using a targeted universalist approach that looks to center the most historically excluded voices within ISE. In doing so, we recognize that ISE for several groups has been extractive, colonizing, and even traumatic. So doing this work must also involve the creation of counter spaces for healing and the interrogation of systemic inequities as vital parts to research agendas. In this, we can co-create communities of practice that are tethered around identity and equity to improve the field. Including diverse population leads to thinking of ways that we amplify voices and highlight the cultural wealth and how to work with, not on, diverse communities. We have to reimagine how we conduct webinars, hold convenings, and meetings, and we have to ensure that equity-oriented processes remain at the center of research and practice for our own work. This empowers diverse ways of knowing and being within the field, and how to create sustained conversation and implementation. The Revise Center aims to support a community of learning and activism through its research and practice. And last, one of the best ways to accomplish this is through the expansion of the NSF ASL and NSF's grant portfolio. To do this, we will identify and support what we term ASL aspiring organizations, which are smaller community-based organizations or groups that may be interested in conducting research and pursuing federal funding, but may be new to the federal funding or NSF ASL landscape. Our aim is to walk alongside them more closely throughout the process to better understand their organizational and community needs, while providing the support where necessary. For example, this requires grant management capacity and support in creating trusting relationships for grant collaboration. The work with AAOs can then be used to write up case studies that will serve the broader ISE community's understanding on how to effectively pursue funding. Also, we envision working with NSF to expand opportunities for the ISE community to become more involved with the review process, which gives especially newer folks or practitioners more insight into the funding process and institutional knowledge of NSF. And now we're going to hear from Diane Miller, who will talk a bit more about stakeholder engagement and looking to connect with focal audiences.
Thank you, Stephen. So working with the other PIs, our advisors, and Organic Oneness, Our plan is to co-create communities of practice with individuals and organizations. We understand, as Stephen said, how much work has already been done. And the thing is, we want everyone to participate in this. This is not about what the Revise Center can do, but what we can do together. So we want to conduct equity-focused evidence. We want to, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm ready. We want to continue to grow organizations' ability to design and conduct equity-focused evidence-based innovations in ISE research, programming, or both. So when we look at the different audiences, we're going to try and work with we will work with all of them at the same time. We'll start with those individuals and organizations that are already PIs, that know NSF, but would like to know more about how to look at equity in their work. We also want to target the partners in these organizations, people who are part of a project, but not a PI. It may be have not thought about their role and how they could be PI. And our other target audience would be researchers and practitioners. So this would be our first group, but then at the same time, we're going to be looking at organizations and people who have been excluded as stakeholders. We're going to find strategies to find hard to reach and engage stakeholders, people who just have not been thinking of NSF as a place that would support them. And again, we will be looking to the community, the ISE community, our advisors, our PIs. And as we work with you, we'll try and find out from you, who are we missing and who else can we invite in and support? So when we think about the tools, we know we'll start off with some very traditional tools, like Stephen mentioned. We're not going to give up some of those traditional tools because they work for many of us. We will have websites and newsletters and blog posts. And our advisors are a key resource for tools and how this is working. But by working with creating ways to reach out and get information from you, then we will be able to find other ways to reach people that maybe these don't work. We've been thinking about things like a brag and swag wall, virtual communities of practice that support interest group. And we feel like it's very important to create counter spaces where people who have been excluded feel very safe to come in and have conversations as they get involved. And we're looking for your ideas of things that maybe we haven't thought of, that you have tried that really work in your communities. So Stephen will come back and talk about how we're going to evaluate equity, the work that you're doing and we're doing.
Thank you, Diane. And so it is a vital question for all of us to consider: how do you assess progress on the evaluation of equity? What does it mean to interrogate trust between groups of individuals? And how do you track this over a long period of time? And so I'm going to just mention a few of the ways that we have been thinking about it and ways in which we plan to assess. And so the very first thing that our evaluator and our team has proposed is that we lean on our resources of advisors. And so we will leverage the expertise of the advisors and the field itself. And we are forming an advisory council composed of our evaluators and of our advisors and folks from the field directly, to serve as cultural guides that will allow for collaborative and culturally responsive, equitable evaluation. This gives us more insight into what the field needs, how the field is thinking about progress, and how we should be guiding our initiatives. Second, we will be conducting a formative and summative evaluation and looking at a sustainability study, which tracks the impact of our equity initiatives over time. For example, we can have blog series, we can have speaker series that amplify voices from historically excluded populations, but we don't know if that translates into impact at the cultural institutional level. And so we want to be able to do that over time. And last, we will be conducting in-depth case studies with our ASIL aspiring organizations. As noted before, working closely alongside organizations through the process will provide insight into the general process, but also into the nuances of how to pursue federal funding and what are the needs that need to be addressed along the way. And so that gives us a sense of how we want to track the impact of the work that is done by the center. And now we'll transition to discussing the website, which is a very vital part of the development of the virtual community. And I will pass it over to Pati. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. As has been mentioned throughout this presentation, we encourage you to find us at our website, informalscience.org. And we also encourage you to read and subscribe to our newsletter. Both of those links are ones that I've just dropped in the chat for you. You'll find a lot of good information in our first revised newsletter, which is linked off of our homepage. And again, please subscribe to our newsletter so that you can stay up to date with information and updates from the field. And most importantly, again, as has been shared earlier, Stephen described that our hope is to better understand your needs so that we can co-create this community with you. So we want to ask you, how do you want to participate? Please let us know by visiting informalscience.org and contacting us at this email address, revise@turk.edu. And you'll also be getting a short survey from us after this webinar, and we look forward to hearing your feedback and thoughts about how our work can best serve your needs. And again, please use the Q&A feature that's in Zoom. It's at the bottom of your screen. It's a little button with two little conversation bubbles. And currently it has a number 2. So we really encourage you to share your questions here with us. We really want to hear from you, and we look forward to working with you on this. So again, we look forward to answering your questions, and I am going to pass it back over to Stephen.
Thank you, Pati, and thank you to Diane, and thank you to Lisette for being comrades and being thought leaders along this process. Again, we want to thank everyone that we've acknowledged in the beginning for getting to this point. And there are probably a few names that we've forgotten to mention, not intentionally, of course. But we also want to thank you who are in the field for the work that you have done, the work that you continue to do, and the great work that has yet to be done. We are committed with you to disrupting inequity. And we are ecstatic to field your questions about the center, about some of the ideas that we've shared today. And with that, I think we can open up the gates for some questions. And I think we've already been doing that. So if there are any questions that I can sort of read the Q&A.
Yeah,
And,
Stephen, I can start with one of the questions that I think was answered in the Q&A earlier, but it might be worth addressing here with everyone. The question is, what do we mean by diversity? And I'm wondering if you can say a few words about that.
Sure. And I think I think as an equity resource center, I think it's important to again acknowledge that we are not involved in the decision making around funding. We provide resources to the field that further delineate concerns on equity, that can help educate people on issues of understanding what are different lenses of diversity, what are different equity-oriented practices that you can add to your proposals that can put you in a better position when your proposal is being reviewed. But I think those are great questions for program officers to answer, just simply because we're not in that position where we're deciding. And it's important to say that we are not the authorities on equity, but we are great champions of it and folks who are dedicated to furthering the work. So I think I'll answer it there.
Thank you, Stephen. No, that was great. We have another question about whether the recording will be available with the PowerPoint itself as well. And I will answer yes, we can make the PowerPoint available on our website. And Stephen, I think we're also planning on posting the recording. Is that correct, on our website?
Yes, that is correct.
Wonderful. We had a question earlier about the brag and swag wall, and this is something that Lisette has talked about before, so I'm going to encourage her to come back on camera and share a few words about what we mean when we say brag and swag wall.
Yeah, so the brag and swag wall was something that I came across reading Emergent Strategy, which is a really good book that I recommend for any of you who are activist and change oriented. But in terms of the brag and swag wall, in its version through the Revised Center, we imagine it as being a virtual wall on the website where essentially folks from the ISE community can share their accomplishments in terms of equity practices, so thus the bragging portion. And then in terms of the swag portion, it's the ISE field sharing resources and basically things that folks can share amongst each other. So that's the swag. So it's all the stuff that you can get to help you on your equity journey.
Thank you so much, Lisette. I'd like to invite Monya back on so that you can share anything you'd like to say from the NSF perspective.
Oh, sure. Thanks. Thanks, Patty, Stephen, Lisette, and Diane and team. What a great presentation. So thank you for that. I'm happy to just respond to the question regarding diversity. And Stephen, you mentioned the NSF perspective. And so I thought it might be useful for those who are attending to just hear a little bit more about how we think about diversity at the National Science Foundation. And I can tell you that we have quite a broad definition for diversity. And for us, it could involve the individuals and communities that are involved. We highlight underrepresented communities, although it could also involve and include those with disabilities, various demographic diversities, and also I should mention the intersectionality thereof of these different variables that come into thinking about diverse factors. We also have geographic diversity. We also look at discipline diversity. We also look at partner diversity. So there are just many ways that we think about diversity. I would also note that we are very much interested in how the different individuals are engaged in the work. So also when we talk about diversity, who's part of the leadership team, you know, who is contributing to the work and to what degree. So there are just many different ways and layers to how we think about diversity. And we do say a little bit about it in our solicitation. So I would invite you to have a look at both the program solicitation and even the call for this resource center, as well as the NSF strategic plan. Okay, so thank you for that. I hope that helps.
Thank you so much for coming back on and sharing that information with us.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and we have a few more questions. I'm gonna go with an easier one. Lisette, you mentioned a book, and we wanted to get that title. So if you could drop the title of the book you mentioned and share it with us again, and then we can also type it back into the Q&A.
Certainly. It's Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. There was a question about the communities of practice that we're envisioning. So the question is, I'd like to hear more about the communities of practice. How can we get involved? What will these communities focus on? And I'd like to turn that one to anyone, Stephen, Diane, maybe.
Sure. So just making sure. So with regard to the communities of practice, I think it's the first thing that we're trying to do is figure out what's the best way to identify the focal audiences. And I mean, I think we can start with aspects of different identity, but then there are also different subfields within ISE that can form groups. For example, it could be a group that's tethered around out of school programming or out of school research, or if you're thinking about arts integration into STEM practice. We can start there and thinking about who are the people that are conducting research in this area who would be interested in forming a group. It starts really there with those types of conversations, and then it can grow into meeting more regularly and allowing groups to develop organically. We're also, something that we have mentioned is we are also working with Organic Oneness, which is a wonderful organization that is interested in, that actually I would think is very knowledgeable, particularly in grassroots approach to working with communities that have been historically excluded, and thinking about how do we bring them and center them in the conversation, and as we're looking to form those communities of practice.
Also, one of the conversations we've been having as PIs about this is that a lot of times in the communities of practice, some people see themselves as the people who do the work, and not the people who are generating new knowledge and doing the research. And so we want to have a conversation, like, what does it mean to, because the NSF goals is about creating new knowledge. It is about research. And so some of the practitioners have a lot to contribute. So by getting them involved and having those conversations, so they're involved in informal science education, they're working at cultural institutions, and oftentimes they're partners in a grant, but they don't have the control. They're not the PIs, they're not designing the programs. So we want to have those conversations because we're seeing that the PIs are not trying to exclude people. And so if we have these conversations, it may change the way people think about how they write their grant and who they include, especially in the level of PI or research.
Thank you so much, Diane. We have another question a little bit related to this. How are we going to be structuring and convening community of practice for this endeavor? And specifically, will we be adopting a range of equity-centered pedagogies to center the work? Again, that one goes back out to all three of you.
I mean, I can say where we started, and I think this is going back to the statement around that we start with a framework and we go from there as to include the different perspectives. When we started, we began with a critical race, but also a critical disability framework to really think about how we were going to disrupt sort of ableist and also racist ideology that may exist or that does exist in informal STEM education cultural institutions. So we've started there, but I think suffice to say that we are open completely to thinking about other critical frameworks that go along with that. And I'll pass it off to Lisette or Diane.
I would just add in terms of critical approaches, I mean, I'm always, as a critical race theorist myself, I'm always on the lookout for other ways and open to bringing together multiple pedagogies, multiple theoretical frameworks, kind of seeing what the possibilities are. And so I think in terms of the Revise Center, I feel like it's our job to offer those up to you all, helping you find whatever theoretical lenses or methodologies that would work best for you, your cultural institution, and your target audiences. And kind of also reminding you about the limitations of some of those frameworks, but also the need for intentionality with their use. And so I think it's more than just, here's a framework, go use it. It's more, here's a framework, but these are the other considerations that you need to have when using it.
Yeah, you know, one of the most exciting thing is the number of people involved in creating this new knowledge and thinking about this, the number of advisors we have, and the communities that we're working with. And so we talk about, like, just like Lisette said, it's not about finding one thing that works. It's about this idea of looking at this. I like to think of like people who are all singing, and eventually we're going to be a choir. Like everybody's singing this song, but what would the choir sound like? And so it's bringing all this together because it might be 3 or 4 frameworks that work for you. But how do you really reflect on it and make it into something that works?
Thank you, Diane. So there's another question around community here. Many NSF-supported grant programs employ education, outreach, and communication staff that have intimate knowledge of their programs and how their research and equity work reaches partners. How do you see staff like this contributing and or potentially leading communities of practice? And thank you for your insights.
I can take a stab at that one. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, I think that we see staff also as bringing in their own lens, but also their knowledge of equity, whether it be equity frameworks, work that they've done in the past, or work that they would like to do, but may have never had the opportunity to do. I think when I think of our center manager positions and our content and communication coordinator positions, there's a lot of opportunity there to contribute to maybe thinking about a new community of practice, developing that, leading the way or the charge of convening one and seeing where that takes them. So I think we're open to that, if I'm understanding again the question correctly.
Thank you, Stephen. Anyone else want to jump in on that one?
It's a complicated one, and I think I have to read it again to make sure I understand the question. So,
yeah, and let me read it out loud, Diane, again.
Okay.
How do you see staff like this contributing and or potentially leading communities of practice? So staff that have intimate knowledge about their programs and how their research and equity work reaches partners and the community at large, I believe.
So if I'm understanding the question correctly, the way I see this is that this is a group that might be, a group that we get together and we start to, how do they see themselves? How do they see the larger picture? Do they know NSF? What is their role? Is their role just to deliver programs, design and deliver programs? It's a lot. And so this would be an ongoing conversation. It's one that in working with organic oneness that we would start to put to get, this might be a separate group that we're working with. What are the barriers? What are your successes? What do you have to say? So unpacking all that. So that is what, like we said, we're going to start with people that are close to NSF, but our goal is to ripple out. And I think that's one of the targeted groups that we're thinking of that eventually would be their own group. They're doing professional development with them, but also creating those counter spaces for them to talk and figure out what can and should they be doing. They definitely would be a group that we would be targeting.
And just to add, this is Lisette speaking, I would say it also behooves the supervisors of those staff to make sure that they have the time and availability to participate in these opportunities.
If I may, I think my colleagues have given me more insight. I think also the opportunity to lead those communities of practice are alive and well, also specifically because, as we said before, being a counter space, the work is taxing for many folks, especially if we're talking about trauma that exists historically for cultural institutions. And so it's a burden to sort of put that on the folks who are doing the work and asking them to also maintain these communities of practice also. So I do think that there is an opportunity for our center staff to really step in and really support the leadership there.
Thank you. On a related question about networks and partners, someone said, I love the idea of reaching into our networks to elevate organizations to become PIs as opposed to project partners. Have you thought more about ways to bring our various networks and project partners together? And then there's a related question here as well around research practice partnerships and opportunities for research practice partnerships at Revise. Are there any research practice partnership initiatives going on?
Oh, okay, I'll take a bit of this one. One, I think it's important to know that I would say collectively we're in the information gathering phase right now for learning about different focal audiences that we should be highlighting. With respect to research and practice partnerships, I think we have a great foundation. I'm thinking about the research to practice partnership that was headed up by Case that has a lot of foundational material that we can use to build off of to continue those partnerships as well. And I think that we're at this stage we're really thinking about how to bring those partners into I think to Diane's point earlier about getting like practitioners more into that center role and really thinking about how they become PIs as well, and thinking about the great research that they're actually doing, but may not see it that way. So I think I just would reiterate that.
Thank you, Stephen. There's a question about cultural guides. Could you describe more about the cultural guides and how will cultural guides be identified?
Sure, I can speak to that. So Kirill asked you and her team proposed the idea of convening an advisory and thinking about how we want to gather. We're thinking probably around the time of May or June-ish that people will hear more information about how people can become involved with that. And currently, I believe the team from our advisors will be around 7 folks who will be part of that advisory group, including 2 people from the field. And they will be sending out more information. We'll be sending out more information about how people can become potentially involved with that process as well.
Thank you, Stephen. Along those same lines, there's another comment. As a person whose work is focused on bridging between researchers in STEM learning and teaching and practitioners in out-of-school time programs, I'm very interested in connecting with the Revise Center. It sounds like other people are as well. What are the next steps for those of us in this field to engage with the center? And like we've said before, we hope to have more information on this on the website. Please subscribe to our newsletter because we will be making more announcements there. Participating here today is a great way to connect with us. And you also have our email address, so please don't hesitate to reach out via email to us because we want to talk to you. And we want to set up meetings with you and hear from you truly. So I'll let anyone else jump in here as well.
I would just add, this is Lisette speaking. I would just add that we have a ton of ideas. so if you're asking to be involved, we really hope you will be, because we are going to need a lot of folks, especially in terms of reaching the most marginalized and underserved populations. We're going to need a lot of bodies to identify areas of need and to make those connections across the field.
I think like I would add, because we have a lot of ideas, you've probably, like, you've read about the brag and swag wall. You've read about podcasts and blogs using all of the traditional tools that I think folks have used elsewhere. For example, if there's a topic that you would like to discuss, or you feel needs to be discussed in the field, that's also part of why we're gathering information from you. So please participate also in the post-conversation survey so that we know what are, for example, topics that we should be discussing as a center. Particularly a big one for thinking about bringing in community-based organizations is capacity building. What are the needs of smaller organizations to truly not just pursue federal funding, but to manage a federally funded grant? And what are all the bells and whistles that need to go along with that? And then finally, I think I'll reiterate the ability to join, perhaps as a cultural guide, the advisory for the evaluation group, which is a cross-sectional in terms of the area of practice within ISE, but also geographically across the country. And folks on that advisory council can rotate on or off. And really the aim from Kirill is that they are able to work with you all as part of the advisory in a very flexible manner that really inspires your engagement within the process of evaluation around equity. So I will say that's another opportunity to become more involved there. Yeah. Did we have more questions, Bati? Or
I think we have a lot of good information here that's come in through the Q&A portal. We do want to remind you that we'd love to hear these again through the post-webinar survey. Of course, we will be collecting all of the information that you've shared in Q&A already. And we do look forward to hearing from you all. I noticed that there were some of you who wanted to suggest the formation of communities of practice as well. We welcome that. Please email us. Please make a note of that in the post-webinar survey. And again, we really want to hear from you. And I will turn it over to the other PIs for closing thoughts.
I guess my closing thought, I would just say that we are here to assist you with resources, trainings, workshops, capacity building, essentially, in the ISE field. So in terms of going beyond ISE, that's not where the center stands. We're very focused on informal STEM learning spaces. And one thing that Stephen said that just in terms of like new things to consider, you had mentioned letting us know about things that we should be covering. One thing that one of you just mentioned in the Q&A reminded me that, you know, there are things like trauma-informed pedagogy and practices that we should all be paying attention to, given the COVID pandemic and the amount of stress that a lot of marginalized communities are experiencing right now. So if you have ideas like that, things that we hadn't considered in terms of what we can share with the rest of the ISE field, certainly let us know.
I just want my closing remark. I want to thank Organic Oneness for all the support. We work very together, and we're going to be spending a lot of our time on identifying communities and thinking how we're going to convene communities, when we can meet with people in person, and how we're going to be putting together virtual communities.
My closing thoughts are simply that we're all locked in when it comes to this work. And the journey from proposal to this moment has been immensely productive and has encouraged, speak for myself, very introspective and reflective on how we do everything. And I cannot be thankful enough for that. And I think that I'm looking forward to the work. And Lisette said it earlier, that this work extends beyond the lifespan of 5 years. This is generations upon generations of work to really advance equity. And again, I'm just really thankful. So I'm looking forward to working with everyone here and beyond.
And thank you everyone for joining us today. Please be in touch.
Thank you.